Hello, this is Richard Bennett with the Indie Writers, and to my left is Walter Dale Harvey, author of The Stone, his second book, right?
Yep, my second book. Yep.
Okay. What made you decide to write The Stone?
Well, The Stone, I ended up writing The Star first, a series called The Magi Manuscripts, Volume 1, 2, and 3. And they're all about the nativity scene, the birth of Jesus, the Christmas story, if you will. It's all kind of about that. So I originally was writing The Star to be a novel that the screenplay was taken from, but I ended up getting so involved and loving it so much that I thought, ooh, I'll write a story about the animal's perspective of that night, and that's called The Stable. That's what I'm working on. And then The Stone is the shepherd's perspective of that night and how they get to Bethlehem. And then The Star is the wise men's perspective of the nativity scene and the birth of Jesus and how they get to Bethlehem. So it's ended up being a trilogy, and I think it worked out really well. I think it's going to work out really well when I get that third book finally finished.
Yeah. Next question. Who are the main characters?
Oh, the main characters of The Stone, you know, maybe it's because I read a lot of O. Henry when I was a kid and writers like that, but I wanted a way that the story of the shepherds would weave into other stories from the Bible. So one of the shepherds is the great-great-great-grandson of King David. His name is Boaz. And so I pulled from the Old Testament and some writings about the Old Testament and the lineage of that. And then the second shepherd is Timothy, and he is kind of the prodigal son, if you will. So his story is about leaving Rome and being wealthy and ending up in Bethlehem, feeding the pigs and the sheep and being broke. So that's his part of the story. And then the third one is just kind of a guy who is a fighter, and he is a prisoner and that sort of thing, and his name is Mattathias, and he's the true love interest in the stories, which I wanted to try to represent the story of true love and how his journey, his heart gets broken and things happen, and he ends up also in Bethlehem due to losing his first love.
What was his love interest's name?
Well, there's Lydia.
Lydia, that's right.
And she is the one that he falls in love with, and then he loses her and is brokenhearted and ends up on a slave ship and ends up at the seaside port and is shipped into Bethlehem and sold as a slave again. And eventually he's so brokenhearted he can't work and no one wants to bother with him, but Boaz picks him up at a kind of, not a slave auction, but just kind of he's in a bar getting beat up and thrown out in the street, and Boaz picks him up and says, "You used to be a slave. You come with me and I'll give you a job." And so he kind of nurses him back to health and brings him into the shepherd's area and gives him a job.
Well, you came up with some good names in this story. Now, how did you come up with this name, Gulgalis?
Oh, Gulgalis. Well, the name Goliath means, to be hidden or to be covered. And so I made up Gulgalis because after Goliath and David, after their grand battle, and of course David wins, the lineage of Goliath and his family, they track David down and want to kill him and kill his family. So I kind of started the biblical version of the Hatfields and the McCoys.
Yeah.
So they trace each other down through the centuries, and eventually Gulgalis catches up to Boaz, who's the last, lineage of the house of David, and is wanting to kill him. And so that's kind of the epic, or the epicenter of the book is that battle that goes on all the way through the book.
Now, the Stones. Give me a rundown of the Stones.
Oh, yeah. Why did the Stone? Well, the Stones, the reason I wrote the book called The Stone and brought it into the Shepherds was when David fights Goliath, he has 5 stones in his pocket, but he only throws one and kills the giant. So the other 4 become these religious relics, if you will, or the last witnesses of the battle of David versus Goliath. So the Judeans, the Jewish people, kind of revere these stones, and they need to be hidden because they realize the power of the stones because they killed Goliath. And there's a certain reverence for that. And so these stones get handed down through the centuries, and the grandfather of Boaz realizes these stones are going to be used someday again and need to be another miracle. And so don't let anyone see them, don't let anyone, have them, and don't waste these stones because they're going to be needed. So Boaz keeps them and eventually uses all the stones by the end of the story.
Okay. I want to talk right now about the character Delilah.
Oh, boy.
How did you come up with a name like Delilah?
Well, you know the story of Samson and Delilah.
Yeah.
She turns traitor on Samson, and she's a very evil woman. Let's just put it that way. So Delilah was my way of giving a nod to Delilah, saying, I remember you being a bad person. She's a bad person, too. So that's kind of my nod to Delilah.
She was a good character. I liked her. She added a lot of interest to the story.
Yeah, she's not a nice person.
And there was another one who was totally evil, with no redeeming virtues at all. Her name was Ayala. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, Ayala. Yeah, she's once again had two evil women characters in the book. Not that, just it ended up that way because I wanted to counterbalance the story of Mattathias, who is trying to find true love and gets it taken from him by another woman. So that's why those two characters ended up in the story.
Okay, well, I enjoyed it.
Well, thank you.
What would you like to say to the general public about this book?
This book, I love this story. I love to put something in a book that speaks to the heart, not spiritually or anything like that, but just as something I want to leave people with. And in this book, I think the apex of the story happens when Boaz has the 4 stones, right, from being handed down, and 2 of them get used in a battle against Galgalas, who has finally found him, and they save his life. And then at one point, Boaz is told by Nathan, the old wise man he runs across in the book, who's the prophet, a profiteer, a prophesier. He runs across him, and so he says to him, one day there will be 3, but only 2. And it's kind of a riddle for Boaz, and he doesn't understand what the riddle means. And at one point in the story, Galgalas is attacking the 3 shepherds with lions and spears, and he's there by himself, and he wants to personally kill Boaz and end the lineage of the house of David. And he hopes that it will restore the house of Goliath to the kingdom and all that sort of thing. So anyway, at one point he traps the 3 shepherds, and Boaz realizes he only has 2 stones. So if he's going to use them, and now is the time to use them, who is he going to save? The 2 friends of his, Mattathias and Timothy, or is he going to save himself and one of them? Well, he makes the decision to save the other 2 men, and he does, and Galgalas kills him because he made that choice. And so it's about, in life, sometimes you have to make really hard choices, and which choice you're going to make. And in the end, Boaz gets his life back because spoiler alert,
because
he
he's
gets his
good.
life back because he made the right choice. The angels come, and when the angels come, that's in the Bible, in the story of Luke, there's a verse about the angels appeared and the shepherds were sore afraid, very afraid, and so the angels come and they surprise the shepherds and give Boaz back his life and say, you made the right choice. There's a verse in the Bible that says, greater love has no man than to lay down his life for his friends. And Boaz lays down his life for his friends. And so I kind of attribute the dedication of that verse to him in the story.
Okay, now Walter, your first 2 books, The Star and the Stone, they are kind of in the almost, I'm going to use this French word, genre of action adventure.
Yeah.
And they're almost like the Indiana Jones version of the Bible. Plenty of you had plenty of what you call artistic license to add to the books. And
you mean to the Bible itself?
Well, to the Bible itself, yeah. But you didn't dabble in philosophy or scripture or theology.
Yeah. No, I didn't want to do that. It really just is about storytelling. So these are not Bible stories, so to speak. I use a
like
sliver. Yeah, in a sense, I use a sliver of historical narrative from the Bible to tell a story that's missing, verbally and written out in the Bible itself. There's just pieces where there are big gaps of Jesus' life and all these other things. So I really want to use it as a narration of the untold story in a sense, but it's not the Bible. It's not. I'm not spreading the, I'm not trying to be a philosopher or a theologian like you said.
Okay, well, thank you, Walter.
Thank you, Richard. Appreciate it very much.